So we'll do the Toyota first here. You notice it is running, and when it's running, the alternator is going to put out a little higher voltage. We're looking at about 14 volts there. Turn on the light, see if that'll help. Okay, so we're going to turn the car off now and just see what our voltage is after we shut the car off. Okay, so this is what we call a, excuse me while I get the key off. This is what we're going to call an open circuit voltage test. But if you notice, it's very high. We're supposed to have 12.6 volts. That's because this has got what we call a surface charge on it. It's recently been running, so therefore it's got kind of a fake charge. One of the best ways to release that fake charge is just do a little bit of a draw on it. We'll just turn the lights on for a minute, and that'll draw the voltage down a little bit. Put a little bit of draw on it. So I've got the ignition switch on, the headlights, a few things drawn on it. Now we're below 12 volts. Well, that's also kind of a misleading voltage, but that's okay. We just do that for a minute. Probably want to run it about a minute, headlights on or something like that, and just take most of the draw off it. Now we have something a little more believable. 12.18, which is a little low, but you notice it's climbing. So probably if we let it sit here long enough, which we'd need to do to stabilize, it should get up in the 12.5 to 12.6 voltage. That's what we should have on a stabilized battery. All right. So right now, though, at that 12.23, we would say this voltage might be a little bit low. This battery may need some charging on it. I kind of think not, just because of what we just now put it through. All right. So that's one of the tests that we want to do, is what's called an open circuit voltage test. Now, I'm going to go out of order from what your book talks about. Your book talks about a load test a little later on in the chapter. I would like to do that now. We normally do a load test with a battery tester, which I do not have here, and you probably won't have available at your house. But we do have a vehicle here with lots of electrical accessories, so we can actually use this vehicle to load the battery. What we're trying to figure out is, the battery obviously needs to have voltage, but the question is, does it have voltage and provide amperage at the same time? So I've got the headlights on. I'm going to come in here and I'm just going to turn on a bunch of accessories. So I'm going to turn my fan speed up to high. I'm going to turn on the front and rear defrosters. This has heated seats. Turn both of those on. So I've got a lot of accessories running, which will kind of cause the voltage to go low. All right. So sure enough, the more draw that we put on the battery, the lower the voltage goes. So a draw test is going to put an extremely high rate on the battery. We can't really do that. We don't have that test equipment. But with everything turned on, we should stay about here, about 11.5 volts, for sure above 11 volts. So that tells us that even when we have everything loaded, everything turned on, the battery still has pretty good voltage. All your computers and things like that will actually shut off if we go much below 10 volts as we're cranking. So if you're trying to crank and your voltage falls too low, things like your ignition, your fuel pump will not run. This battery is holding steady at that 10.5 or 11.5 volts with everything turned on. So that kind of gives us an idea that the battery is sufficiently charged, probably to do some more testing. All right. This is one of the basic tests that we need to do. Make sure that the battery is sufficient to do the testing that we want to do. So yeah, expensive testers will certainly tell us more than this little test will, but this is kind of something you can do in your driveway or on the road or even in the shop. I'll do this test sometimes. Just put my voltmeter on there, turn on a few items to load it, and see what happens. it should run this load for, 20 minutes or so without really the voltage going extremely low. All right, so we'll turn everything off, and we want to see, does the battery bounce back? And there it is, it's bouncing back. Okay, I want to move to another vehicle and test it real quick. I left the lights on in this, of course, on purpose, and we're going to see what kind of voltage we have here. Okay, get my meter hooked up so I can test the voltage here. And looky here, my voltage, 9.5 volts. This is a much older battery. I recently tested it and it didn't test out real good. And so sure enough, I can bet that this will not start. Let's try it. It did start, just barely. Just barely, if you heard that kind of struggle. So that would be an example of one that's got a low battery, a little weak. It did start the vehicle, but it made some noise. It sounded like the vehicle barely wanted to start. And that, sure enough, would look at that, that battery is low. It could be a bad battery. It maybe just needs to be charged. So actually what I would recommend doing at this point is let's charge that battery. All right, so next let's talk about charging just a little bit.